This is the regular third Friday WILF meeting of the San Jose branch of WILF. Welcome, everyone. Tonight, we are going to hear Rowan give us an update about what has been happening with the Poor People's Campaign and poverty and its impact. So one of the first things we do is we open with our Raging Grannies.
Oh, the Triangle Raging Grannies, which is in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is where Vicki Ryder, one of our most prolific grannies, lives. So they have been working with Bishop Barber, then Reverend Dr. Barber, on Moral Mondays and stuff long before the Poor People's Campaign itself was revived in 2018. So she wrote this wonderful song, The Poor People's Campaign, Time for a Moral Revival, back probably in 2018, and it's to one of my favorite tunes, Acre of Clams. There's something that's troubling the grannies, so we toss and we turn late at night, wondering why there are so many hungry in a land that's so rich that ain't right. It's time for a moral revival, so we've joined the Poor People's Campaign to end poverty in our nation. We've joined the Poor People's Campaign. The government spends all our taxes for killing in wars far away. But we grannies say give our kids books, not bombs, and give the kids teachers fair pay. It's time for a moral revival, so we've joined the Poor People's Campaign. To end senseless wars across the planet, we've joined the Poor People's Campaign. They're drilling and fracking and dumping to fatten their wallets, you see. And they don't really care if we live or die. It's enough to make Mother Earth weep. Now it's time for a moral revival, so we've joined the Poor People's Campaign. To stop them from poisoning our planet, we've joined the Poor People's Campaign. Equality for all the people, they say is the law of the land. But our system is blatantly racist, so together for justice we'll stand. And it's time for a moral revival, so we've joined the Poor People's Campaign. And together we'll pick up the torch and work for the National Poor People's Campaign. We are not afraid of their handcuffs. They can lock us in jail if they must. But we grannies won't sit by in silence while they throw us all under the bus. It's time for a moral revival, so we've joined the Poor People's Campaign. And we're glad all you folks have joined with us in the National Poor People's Campaign. In the National Poor People's Campaign. March 15th is the absolute earliest that a third Friday can be. And so this presentation is not as well baked as I would like it to be. I apologize. If I had another week, I think there would be more of a narrative and the slides would be in a slightly different order, but this is where it finished at 5:30 today when I decided if I didn't eat something before the meeting, I would not be a good presenter. So I took care of myself, but that means the presentation is what it is. So we've been doing some really fun and interesting things. 800 people die from poverty or low wealth every day. So the Poor People's Campaign has been ramping up our efforts to turn people out to vote for policies to promote an end to systemic poverty. And so we just had an amazing march and assembly in 32 state capitals and DC, kicking off 40 weeks of massive voter mobilization across the country with a national coordinated, simultaneous, more or less, mass poor people's no and low wage workers direct action. And so I went to Sacramento for the California March 2nd March and Assembly. But I'm because we had on March 11th, we had a national coordinating committee meeting where they showed off photos from a whole bunch of states, and they had individual photos for every state, but they also had this sort of mass photo. So I thought I'd share that just to give you an idea of the breadth of all these folks mobilizing, demanding that state legislatures take action to end poverty in the United States. And so much of what goes on that affects us happens at the state level. Luckily, of course, in California, we don't have to worry about things like Medicare expansion because, of course, we did. But there are a lot of states that still don't even have Medicare expansion, let alone other programs to assist their low and no wage workers. So our slogan was our votes are our demands. And so we want to abolish poverty as the fourth leading cause of death in the US and pay a living wage and have everybody have health care and stop voter suppression. And we believe in worker rights and labor rights and affordable and adequate housing and an end to violence, profit, and proliferation of weapons. We want clean air and water, environmental justice, all those good things. And so, but each state sort of came up with some of their own. And I kind of like that ours ends with, and the unity of love, not the division of hate, was our final demand in California. And the meme with the sign that is in California, I made that meme for our Twitter feed before I saw what our actual demands were. So those are the national demands. And I'm going to show you just a little tiny 2-minute video. We had about 350 people show up, including a couple busloads from Southern California and the San Fernando Valley. Nationals call for 1,000 people with, in every state capital notwithstanding. I think we did really well. East Coast organizers have no idea how big our state is. The idea that you can get everybody from all over the state come to the Capitol is not quite as realistic when you're in talking California, which is the length. If you took California and flipped it over on the map, the northern end would be in New York and the southern end would be just about at South Carolina. So that's like having the whole East Coast go to Washington, D.C. for an action. 2, 3, here we go. Everybody has a right to live. Everybody has a right to live. We say poverty no more. We want justice for the poor. Everybody has a right to live. Everybody has a right to So that's a little compilation of some of the videos I took. And I wanted to show you some of my still pictures. The top one on the left is Arne Batson, who is one of our California theomusicologists, and she led songs and chants before the march. The singing at the beginning of that video was her here in the church, and she got everybody up marching around the church singing with her, and it was a blast. The next thing, the gal with the megaphone is Nell Myhand, one of our quad chairs leading chants. In front of the church that we started at, people are lining up with the Laney College banner. We have a student Poor People's Campaign branch at Laney College that does amazing teach-ins and things, and a lot of it's online. So if you are a Laney person, that's a great resource. We had a lot of student participation in addition to Laney. We had a busload of folks from Fresno State and also from an LA college that I've forgotten the name of. So the bottom left picture is quad chairs Nell Myhand and Nancy Berlin flanking Santa Clara County Homeless Union activist Robert Aguirre as he testifies about the importance of voting. The picture of the woman and her daughter, that's Rose Gudiel Escobar, another one of the quad chairs. And then there's this group photo of some of the SoCal folks who came up on buses. They literally got on buses at like 3 in the morning to be able to be in Sacramento at 11 to be able to be with us. And so props to them. And then the last picture is the Reverend Monica Cross, our faith quad chair, speaking. And so we had all these amazing testimonies and a march, and that was what we just did. And why do we do this? So I'm going to provide some background for the campaign's search for a moral budget and for ways to change the systemic problems that affect poor folks. So back in 2019, the campaign produced a moral budget. And in the 7 sections of it, we look at policies and investments in 7 critical areas. And we went to Congress, to the Congressional Budget Committee, and appointed it and presented it. And it was amazing. The responses were from reasonable to, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. Why do you need to have special interests, you poor people? And it was very strange. There was one of the guys who said he was a Christian and he didn't give unto Caesar or something like that. And we were like, hello? You're seeing this United States government and you as Caesar, but hey, it was very strange. So, the moral budget is up on the Poor People's Campaign website. I think it's still really relevant. Some of the things that we have abundant resources. The 350 billion in annual military spending, we don't need to do that. If we charge taxes on the wealthy corporations in Wall Street, we could raise another 886 billion. And billions more could come from ending mass incarceration, addressing climate change, and meeting other key campaign demands. And so when you create a budget, that's a moral document because you're choosing things when you choose a budget. And so even though we presented everything, it didn't really go anywhere from there, but it's an amazing document that people spend a lot of work on. So this quote about poverty equals death from Bishop Barber is from the PPC press release about the Moral Poverty Action Congress last year. And to me, it feels like a manifesto. So I don't know. I'm never sure how much time to give people to read stuff, but the key thing there is what I've put in green. There's not a scarcity of resources, but a scarcity of political will. And we will not be silent about this problem. So at the Moral Poverty Action Congress last year, we had this amazing panel called Poverty Kills, the moral mandate for ending poverty in America. And you can still see this panel on C-SPAN. It was amazing. And so economists and public health policy practitioners on poverty and hunger in America got together, talked about this stuff. And the really amazing thing was the information from David Bradley at UC Riverside, who found that poverty is in fact the fourth leading cause of death, to which Bishop Barber quipped that low-wage jobs should come with a warning label, just like cigarettes and other things that cause death. Low wages and low wealth are hazardous to your health.
We're in this together.
Lord have mercy. I forget. It says, I understand poverty, death. Poverty equals death. Thank you. Who said this? Who wrote this? You did? Okay, all right. What is a succinct two-sentence rephrasing? Poverty means more poor people die of the leading causes of death because of the lack of access to health care, food, wages, etc. Is there something better to say? Nope.
That's it.
And you can do that. You can do that different ways. And if you want to, you can rap it. Give me a beat. Poverty means more people die.
All right, Bishop.
It's the leading cause of death in America.
All right, Bishop.
4 times higher than homicide and respiratory disease. Poor folk don't die because they lazy. Poor folk don't die because they won't work. Poor folk die because the system is rigged and they don't have access to food, to health care, to money. But we are that movement that's gonna shake this country up. I said we are that movement that ain't gonna be silent no more. America, get ready. There's a sound coming up from the street. There's a sound coming out from the pulpit. We are like baby's kids. We gonna be everywhere. In the Congress, in the State House, in the street, at the ballot box, in the State House, and in jail, if necessary. All of it, non-violent, all of it, speaking the truth, all of it, standing strong, all of it, with the power of God, all of it, remembering our friends, all of it, with the ancestors. If you don't know, you better ask somebody. If you don't know, you better ask somebody. If you don't know, you better ask somebody. We are that movement.
And so I just thought that was really fun, and I don't know how I stopped my presentation. Let me share my screen again.
Thanks. That was cool.
And that was just so fun. I
Lord
mean, we
have-
were having all these serious discussions, and then suddenly he burst into a rap. Uh, you know, it's an amazing movement to work with. So now I want to talk a little about poverty measures because you've heard me talk about the Poor People's Campaign over the years, and how we measure poverty matters because when we don't measure it accurately, Americans experiencing poverty fall through the cracks because there are many programs that are, quote, means tested. Everything from WIC and SNAP and school breakfast and lunch programs, rural housing assistance, Head Start, taxpayer clinics, youth job program, all kinds of things, rural relief. And you may have seen the recent news that Republicans are trying to cut back two longstanding nutrition programs, the nearly 50-year-old Special Supplemental Program for Women, Infants, and Children, known as WIC, which is currently relied on by about 8 million people, including almost half of all children under 5. Pregnant or postpartum people at or below 185% of the poverty threshold can apply for WIC, but because it is discretionary, if state money runs out, they can be put on a waiting list. So it's not the best social safety net. And the other program is the 60-year-old Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, previously called food stamps, which gives people living at or below the 130% of the federal poverty guidelines help purchasing groceries. More than 41 million people in 22.2 million households currently rely on SNAP. 12.5% of the US population, and yet it only provides an average of $6 per person today. Oh boy, are they going to be eating well? Not. Anyway, both programs have been consistently underfunded and facing budget shortfalls. So this will be an issue in Congress in the next few years and something to watch for and advocate for funding and support. One of the current narratives is that giving people food assistance has caused the childhood obesity epidemic. That reminds me of quotes from President Theodore Roosevelt, who set up relief programs during the Depression, but argued that to continue them afterwards was bad for the country because he thought poor people getting help was destructive of their character. And that stigma associated with receiving assistance persists. We need to break the narrative that blames the poor for their poverty. So, how do we measure poverty in America? We have something called the official poverty measure. In the mid 1960s, the US government established the first federal poverty line, and they used a paper from Molly Orshansky, a staff economist at the Social Security Administration, who calculated a subsistence food budget, the least amount of food that a family needed in 1955. And in 1963, that was what they used to do. And then they multiplied that by 4, and that was what they used for the threshold of people being considered poor. In 2009, the Census Bureau created the Supplemental Poverty Measure, which is based on the cost of basic needs, including food, housing, clothing, lights, gas, and stuff. An SPM threshold differs by family size, by home or rent status, and by location, which makes it a little bit better than OPM. And so when you hear people from the campaign giving numbers, they're generally giving you the numbers from the SPM. But even that isn't adequate, and that's why we're demanding a cost of living poverty measure, and I'll discuss that in upcoming slides, but first I want to share some California numbers. On average, income in California grew 31.5% between 1979 and 2007, but averages hide the truth. The income of the top 1% grew by a 191.8%. and the bottom 99% only grew by 13.2%. So that 35%, 30% number is very confusing, if that's what you're using. Oh, look how good our income grew. And of course, the Great Recession of 2009 to 12 made things worse. The top 1% saw their income rise by 49.6%, and the bottom 99% actually went down in the so-called recovery with an income growth of -3. Then, of course, came the pandemic. And through 2001, the top 1% made 189.5%, with the bottom 99% losing at a -6.3%. So the upshot of these trends is a lopsided California economy where the top 1% average income is 35 times greater than the average income of the bottom 99%. There, right, there are 88 billionaires in Santa Clara County, and yet we still have 7 to 10,000 unhoused neighbors on our streets in recent years, about 250 of whom die in the streets each year. How can this be? If it doesn't outrage you, I don't understand. Um, So I did not redo this slide. I gave a version of this talk a couple years ago, and the most recent numbers at that time were 2018. So these numbers are way out of date, but they give you an idea. The official poverty measure said that a two-parent, two-child family should be making $3,815 a month and not be in poverty. That's you know, and yet these are what it costs per month for cost of living in different counties in California. Um, Notice that San Mateo County, it's 13,000. Santa Clara County, it's almost 11,000. And so I don't care if you're not poor because you make $3,815 a month, according to the national figures, you're still poor. So the Poor People's Campaign demands a change in the official poverty measure. We do not feel that either the OPM or the SPM are doing the job. We have to redefine poverty in terms of economic security and the ability to make most basic needs. So the measure that we use is so antiquated, not just in how it calculates a household budget and what's left out, but also because it doesn't affect real contemporary lived experience, different household types, or even regional differences. That means we aren't accurately classifying poverty and who is poor today. There are a lot of people who are poor, but living above the official poverty line. A single parent with 2 young children would need to make $98,000 a year to cover the basics in the Bay Area. But that's not what the official poverty thinks. So if you're that single mother with the kids who's not, making enough, you're too rich to get social safety net programs. And so we need a cost of living poverty measure that accurately assesses what it takes for all people to have a dignified life wherever they happen to live. Single parents, elders, two-parent households with a few or with lots of children. We have to do better. We have to do better. And so one of the factors, of course, is that wages have been stagnant. The Fair Labor Standards Act sets the federal minimum hourly wage at $7.25 an hour for full-time work, which is 15,000 and change annually. It has not been updated since 2009. The House voted in 2019 for a gradual rise to $15 an hour, but it got killed in the Senate. 7 states, along with the District of Columbia, now have minimum wages of at least $15: Washington, Connecticut, Massachusetts, California, New York, New Jersey, and Maryland. An additional 6 states have approved gradual increases to $15 an hour. Georgia and Wyoming have a lower state minimum than $7.25. And of course, there are various categories: agricultural workers, domestic workers, people working for commission, workers with disabilities, small business employees of small enough businesses can be paid below the minimum wage or sub minimum wage. And of course, tipped workers, their minimum wage has not gone up since 1991, and it's $2.13 an hour. And yet, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics inflation calculator, it takes $181.73 in December 2023 dollars to buy what $100 bought in 2009. So people's wages haven't gone up, but their expenses have almost doubled. No wonder more people are living in poverty. And of course, for women, it's even worse. we just we just passed the National um, Equality Day, the day that white women have made as much. I think it was March 12th this year. If you worked all of 2023 and up until March 12th, and you're a white woman, you would have made as much as a white man made just during the calendar year. And so women are still making, white women are making 74 cents on the dollar, but it's more like 50 cents for some of these other groups. And it's just wrong. And so if we got pay equity, think of how much more food and childcare and other household expenses a household will be able to pay for if they just paid women the same as men. I mean, I know that's something that Joan worked on for years, and it's just. And I want to say these numbers are based on a median annual income for white non-Hispanic men of $60,830. So, and then the median annual pay for the groups of women indicated. Yeah, Equal Pay Day was March 12th. And so we talk a lot in the campaign about closing the wealth gap. Between 2018 and 2020, there were 18,712 poor and low-income Californians, or 47.6% of the population. So almost half of us are poor and low-income folks. And we did raise the state. We've been trying to do things. We raised the state minimum wage as of January 1st of this year. It's $16 an hour. And some of the bills passed last year will raise the state minimum for fast food and healthcare workers. As of April 1, fast food workers in large chains will have to be paid $20 an hour, which, to afford a one-bedroom apartment in Santa Clara County, you have to make $53 an hour. So $20 an hour is not gonna, make anybody turn cartwheels, but it's a heck of a lot better than $7.25. But it just isn't for our area a reasonable pay schedule. I wanted to talk about some of these programs. During the pandemic, there were a lot of programs, and one of them was an expansion of the child tax credit under the American Rescue Plan. And so for the first time, probably ever, child poverty went way down for about a year. And then the child tax credit expired and was not renewed. So a lot of children were kept out of poverty from July to November 2021. But Congress failed to make a deal before it expired in December of 2021. Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, in particular, blocked its renewal. He wanted the credit to include a firm work requirement and to not go to families making over $60,000 a year. He thought parents wouldn't go back to work if the government was paying them benefits. So without the child tax credit, 3.4 million children were in poverty by February 2022 compared to December of 2021. Other pandemic programs ended increasing poverty. For instance, the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, which required states to keep people on the Medicaid rolls enrolled in the program during the COVID health emergency. But as soon as it ended, millions of people lost access to health care because you had to re-register. And the word did not go out, hey, if you want to keep your Medicaid, you have to re-register. We were doing information campaigns all over the state saying, hey, if you're on Medicare, on Medicaid, get re-registered now or you're going to lose your benefits. But millions of people all over the country lost their benefits. This is another one of those quotes by our co-chairs. Reverend Liz says, every person in this nation has a right to demand dignified jobs and living wages, housing, education, healthcare, and welfare. But because we don't have those fundamental rights, thousands are dying as a result. The Poor People's Campaign, though, estimates that there are around 85 million poor and low-wage eligible voters across the U.S., roughly 30% of the country's electorate. In 2020, according to a study released by the campaign and its allies, 168 million Americans who voted had an annual household income of less than $50,000. So we aim to educate, register, and turn out voters again this year because there are an awful lot of races where the margin of victory is low enough that if we can get our people out there and voting for their own interests, which is always an interesting problem, we could make a real difference. What we've been saying is that we need a third Reconstruction. Drawing on the transformational history of the first Reconstruction following the Civil War and the second Reconstruction of the civil rights struggles of the 20th century, the third Reconstruction is a revival of our constitutional commitment to establish justice, provide for the general welfare, end decades of austerity, and recognize that policies that center the 140 million poor and low income people in the country are also good economic policies that can heal and transform our nation. We've in 2021 and 2023, Representatives Barbara Lee and Pramila Jayapal introduced a non-binding congressional resolution to work on a third Reconstruction agenda, and hopefully we'll find legislators who will put it again. But it's been really interesting to see who in what states signed on to that agenda. And we did pretty well in California with getting folks, although we never did get Zoe Lofgren to sign on. We need to get both state and federal legislators to pay attention. And so that took me to who governs. So Duke University did a recent study that shows that out of 7,400 state lawmakers, 116 qualify as working class. That's about 1% of Republicans and 2% of Democrats and state legislators come from working class occupations. And as a group, working class legislators, even those who are Republican, are more likely to favor policies like raising the minimum wage, expanding unemployment insurance, or regulating corporations than their counterparts from professional occupations. And like I say on the slide, 37% of all state legislators are business owners, and lawyers and judges make up 14%. So that's half of the legislators. In the 120 California legislators, a dozen are dynastic members. They have current or former members of their immediate family who've also served. There are no working class legislatures, although there are a couple from, quote, working class neighborhoods, end quote, who maybe had a working class job themselves before they got their degrees in professions like social work. I could not find good info for the current U.S. legislature, but the median net worth of U.S. Congress members is over $1 million. And the 113th Congress, which is 2012, was the first time in history that the majority of members were millionaires. So these folks are unlikely to have the interests of the working class and poor on their radar. And so one of the things that my research showed is how pervasive the false moral narrative still is. We continue blaming the poor for their situation instead of recognizing systemic forces that keep folks down. Joe Manchin imagines that parents will buy drugs with a child tax credit, or that it's enough money to keep parents from going back to work after COVID. Republicans think that food assistance leads to childhood obesity and not the cheap processed food that people can buy on the pittance given. We did say $6 per person per day is how much you can get on food stamps. So COVID relief studies showed, in fact, that people who got more food assistance bought more fruits and vegetables instead of buying unhealthy food. So we will continue the campaign to confront the interlocking evils of systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, militarism, and the war economy, and the distorted moral narrative that blames the poor. And that's about all I have to say. So I'm going to stop sharing and take questions.
So how much of how much of this kind of thing was shared at the California Capitol, for example, or do you know as far as what was shared either electronically or in person in other places?
Well, one of the things that the campaign did at Impact, Bishop Barber is really big on we cannot be loud and wrong. So we are constantly working with economists and research organizations to get the latest numbers. So at Impact last year, we released new state fact sheets. And so we have sent the state fact sheet for California to, I think, every California state legislator, along with a, letter saying, this is who we are, this is what we want, these are our demands, So, yeah, so the march was on Saturday, but there were demand and literature drop-offs on Monday that people went to the legislature and gave to the governor and gave to the legislators the fact sheet. And you can download any state's fact sheet from the Poor People's Campaign website under Learn. And then there are also specific topic, like I think there's a COVID fact sheet, there's a poverty fact sheet, there may be a militarism fact sheet. I'm more familiar with what the 2020 fact sheets were, but they were all updated for 2023. So we do have a lot of current information. And if you haven't looked at the Poor People's Campaign website, in addition to that budget document I mentioned, there's a document about the consequences of COVID to poor people. There are various and sundry other studies because we're a loud movement, but we're telling you the facts. And that's why I'm really clear also that if we're doing campaign numbers, we're usually using SPM, not OPM, supplemental, not official poverty measures. And things got so much better during the COVID relief, and I really, I read a lot about universal basic income, and it's not a specific campaign thing, although we do talk about it sometimes. I think that would make so much difference. If people had a basic income, you wouldn't have to make a choice between feeding your kids and paying the rent. So that's what I want to work on. I want to work on universal basic income, I think. And of course, because of the moral narrative that the poor are responsible, they're lazy, they make bad choices, they don't take the opportunities that they're offered. Well, if you're living in your car, it's pretty hard to take some of the opportunities you're offered. But that's another story. As y'all know, I've worked with unhoused neighbors for years, and so that's always a consideration for me is, okay, so you have this great program and you have to have a smartphone to fill out the forms, and there are so many systemic barriers to getting help. And that was why so many millions of people lost their Medicaid, because they didn't tell you you had to do it, and the hoops you had to jump through to renew it required devices and stuff, so We say we want to help, but then we don't. And like I say, they come up with these excuses. Oh man, if you give people food stamps, then that leads to childhood obesity. No, no, it really doesn't. It's just that a bag of apples is $5 and 5 TV dinners is $5. What are you going to buy with your $6 a day per person, So rant over.
So, Rowan, how do we go about changing the narrative? I mean, let's talk about WILF. What is our role in that?
Well, I think um, noticing that the narrative exists and challenging it when people bring it up. I also think, we are get out the vote people. Let's vote for some at least working class legislators, because those people, those millionaires, are not going to think about what working people need. They're not, and that was why it was so cool to have people like Ocasio-Cortez coming in, who was an actual working person. And even though it's like 1 and 2% of Republicans and Democrats, those people make a difference once they get elected. And so I think we should pay attention. And that's the other thing, we've talked about for years in the campaign, that you don't hear poverty discussed in the national debates. The word poverty does not appear, although you'll notice that Joe Biden mentioned it at the State of the Union, and he walked on a picket line. I really, really hope that we can keep this labor friendly, poverty friendly narrative going. And I fear that this, election season will bring out lots of the false moral narrative. So Karen and Amy have their hand up. There are a few cities in California that are trying universal basic incomes. That is, they are paying people a certain amount a month. Although there have been some really interesting studies about whether you give people a whole bunch of money at once or whether you give it to them month by month, and how that makes a difference. If people get a lump sum, they tend to invest it in small businesses and things like that. Whereas if you're just getting month to month, you're just paying your bills. So how to go about doing a universal basic income? But Sacramento is just going to implement a universal basic income, and I think Bakersfield did for a while, and some other California cities have done it. So the data is beginning to accumulate what a universal basic income will provide for people and how people use it. Because of course, that's one of these fears, is that, oh no, if you give people money, they'll all quit their jobs and, do nothing. And that's really not how people work.
What do you
Nobody
think
wants
they'll
to
do
do
nothing? They
nothing.
buy drugs with it. They say they'll
They'll
buy
buy
drugs.
drugs with it. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
narrative is just so wrong.
Mhm. Yes.
So, Rowan, how many people do you think were at the March 2nd in Sacramento?
About 350, between 350 and 400. Yeah.
Mm.
At least 350, I should say, right? um,
And it looked like there was a march from where to the Capitol?
yeah, there was a march from Westminster Presbyterian, which is across the street from the Capitol on one side, but we had a permit for the west steps, so we had to go, all the way down and then around and up to the steps. But that's good, because that gives you, someplace to march. And so we had a rally in Westminster Presbyterian. I showed you Arne Batson singing wonderful movement songs for us and getting us all ready to go. And then we went off, and she and Pauline Paisano did amazing music from the stage, which was actually just the top of the steps.
I don't live in California anymore, but I did for 40 years, and I can't afford to move back there. And most people who moved out can't afford to move back.
Right.
But I did read recently that the government finally figured out that there are a lot of rich people who didn't pay any taxes.
Yeah.
And I think there may be a link here to what's going on with poor people. And if the government would get busy and collect those taxes from the rich, maybe the poor people wouldn't be so poor.
That is absolutely one of the points the Poor People's Campaign makes repeatedly. Yeah, a lot of corporations paid their CEOs more than they paid in taxes. And they used their COVID relief monies to buy back their own stock so that they could reward themselves and their stockholders and not do good for the whole community. I mean, I'm ready for a wealth tax. I actually had, this can't go on the recording for tonight, but I have a fun 2-minute video from Robert Reich about tax the wealthy that I decided, well, I'm not going to really include that, but it's actually in my slides. So if anybody wants to see it, I can show you. I love Robert Reich's, he draws the things he's talking about. And so I love that stuff. So are there any more questions? It costs so much. I mean, most of the legislators, state and national, are millionaires at the very least. Ballotpedia has a list of different data sets so that if you really want to crunch numbers, you can go see how much the net worth of pretty much any legislator in the country is. I spent way too much time in the last couple of weeks diving into these kinds of things, trying to, find cohesive numbers to share. But we're not going to get policies that understand the needs of poor and working class people if we're represented by millionaires and billionaires. I mean, that just seems like basic sense to me. And so I think just like, women have various elect women campaigns, I think we need some elect poor and working class people campaigns. Let's figure out a way, even in little local races for like the water board, people are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and and the parties look for people with enough money to fund their own campaigns, so the parties don't have to give them money and stuff like that. I mean, it's totally rigged. And yeah, so sorry, soapboxing again.
Mm. Mm.
We need your soapbox.
Well,
We need it. We need it. It's
Yeah.
good. It's good. Yeah.
so as usual, I talked really fast, and we have 20 minutes left in our meeting.
I have a question for
Okay, Joan.
Charlotte. I have a question. Oh, Charlotte's got her thumb up. And anybody else involved with the Peace Center. Is this topic something that the Peace Center has on the horizon or whatever, or in their sites? I haven't seen it, but I don't see everything, of course.
Well, a few years ago, there was an economic justice group that met every Saturday at the Peace Center. I don't know quite how long ago it was. Michelle was still the director at that point, but I used to go to meetings every good while, and that was how we got the box outside the Peace Center where people leave food, which they do. I roll by there on a fairly regular basis and see the amazing things that people leave off. The other day it was dozens of cabbages, and I was really tempted to steal a cabbage, even though I'm not food insecure. It's like, ooh, cabbage. But yeah, talking about a local peace economy was what we were trying to conceive of that time. Charlotte, feel
Oh,
free to hop in.
I forgot about that. That was a good effort underway. Most of the groups now using the Peace Center are focusing on the situation in Gaza, of course, but one of the well, the upstairs groups we have now include Food Not Bombs. They use the little tiny office for their refrigerator.
Hmm.
And then DSA is also upstairs, and they have, some mutual aid efforts going on. And we also hosted Sean Cartwright when she put together the tombstones
Right.
for that event at the county. Well, this year it wasn't at the county. Well, there was
Well,
one at
her
the county.
event wasn't at the county because she boycotted it because the mayor was coming.
Yes, so whatever. But anyway, yes, so that went on also, the tombstones. And the other groups upstairs now include the South Bay Community Land Trust. But I remember when that local peace economy group was meeting, that was good. And I know what it was. Food Not Bombs is going to take over the peace pantry because they think it needs to be maintained better. I mean, the door fell off, and
Yep.
they're going to fix it up, maybe put in a new one and make sure that it's maintained and kept up.
Oh, that's wonderful news. Thank you. So Karen and Amy?
Yeah. Amy and I, we don't have a lot of money, and we mostly fill ourselves up with like rice and noodles and potatoes and bread stuff. And then actually, not long during the pandemic, Amy got some CalFresh, which is California's food stamps.
SNAP.
It's SNAP benefits. It's only because of that we can afford to get like vegetables and fruit and like other stuff like milk and or yogurt and stuff, cheese. And if Amy wasn't eligible for the SNAP program, then we're just actually before that filling ourselves on just starches,
Carbohydrate.
and we didn't get a lot of protein because
It's expensive.
we didn't have that type of money.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of people who do that. They fill up on a lot of carbohydrate stuff because that's what fills your stomach,
Yeah.
and I think that people, I mean, you have to be really, really poor to qualify for CalFresh. You have to be basically at 100% of the poverty level to qualify. You can have it like you go by the gross income and then the net income.
Yeah.
And the net income has to be 100% of the poverty level before you can join that program. And if she wasn't eligible, we would just be eating like we used to.
Yeah.
Which is just stuff that fills us up.
Yeah.
And that
The legislators would blame you for it. That's the narrative we're trying to break.
Yeah,
exactly the narrative we're trying to break.
We didn't deserve it because all we did, we're just gonna waste the money. We'll just buy drugs or we'll somehow, and it's just the fact that we're disabled, and somehow they find the blame on that somehow.
Yes,
So I mean, CalFresh can really help people.
Yes.
Somehow get healthier food.
Yes.
So it's we don't get much. Amy doesn't get much. She shares it with me.
Yeah.
So we can get fresh stuff in. But it's really, I don't think the Republicans understand that can make a difference in healthy food or just getting by.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that they just have it all wrong.
Yes.
Yeah, all those millionaires representing us, whatever party they're from, don't relate. They don't have to go hungry or make a choice between paying for their medication and paying for their dinner to be something other than rice and beans. So we have to find ways to get better representation, and we don't have any permanent friends and we don't have any permanent enemies. We have interests, and we want to find the people who are willing to work on our interests, which is a better life for everybody, not just for the 1%.
Well, we're at a little after 8:15, so perhaps it's
Okay, time for the grannies.
just to just really everybody applaud, a Zoom applaud. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Rowan. Oh, I learned a lot, and a lot of it went right out of my brain. So I'm really glad you're going to post it. Where are you posting it?
On our YouTube channel, the WILF San Jose YouTube channel, we have a playlist of our monthly meetings, and it will join them probably by Wednesday. That's my commitment to myself, is that I get the Friday night meeting up by the following Wednesday.
That's good, because a lot of that data I need, and the places to find it. I think you do a lot of research, and I learn a lot about, oh, this is where you find this stuff. So you have the data.
Oh, well, so I have an article coming out in the next Peace and Freedom magazine on this topic with so many footnotes. In fact, she said, "Can I put some of your footnotes in line rather than having all the footnotes at the end?" And I'm like, do whatever you like. Yes, link them in line instead of having a big list of footnotes at the end. But basically everything I said tonight will be covered in my paper that I wrote for Peace and Freedom. And most everything I covered tonight anyway. And so I think it's coming out in April in the Peace and Freedom magazine. And it will be Poverty Equals Death, with a nice picture of our press conference from the impact last year.
Me, we're rising up in San Jose and joining the campaign, a task that wasn't finished when the Reverend King was slain. 50 years have come and gone, but still his words ring true. So how's this war economy working out for you? We are marching in the Poor People's Campaign. With voices loud and fists draped high, we're throwing off our chains. And we'll keep marching forward, and we won't go back again. Together we are strong. They tell us there's no money now for jobs or healthcare plans, but there's always lots of money for their wars in far off lands. They spend it all for war and not for schools or homes, that's true. So how's this war economy working out for you? They spent $3 trillion when they sent our kids to war. Not all our kids, but just the brown, the black, the poor. They had no hope of finding jobs in good old USA. So how's this war economy working for them today? We are marching in the Poor People's Campaign. With voices loud and fists raised high, we're throwing off our chains. And we'll keep marching forward, and we won't go back again. Together we are strong. There's coal ash pipelines fracking, and there's drilling off our shores, and the toxic waste gets dumped upon the people who are poor. The profiteers will kill us, so let's raise an awful fuss, 'cause it's clear this war economy ain't working out for us. As we stand today in San Jose, we sing our simple song. For dignity, for everyone, a place we all belong. Listen, politicians, we won't take it anymore. In a land as rich as this one, why should anyone be poor? We are marching in the Poor People's Campaign. With voices loud and fists raised high, we're throwing off our chains. And we'll keep marching forward, and we won't go back again. Together we are strong.
We're a movement that votes. We're a movement that gets the data and votes. And so we're registering, educating, mobilizing folks for a movement that votes. And so that's the Poor People's Campaign. Oh, and I forgot to mention when we're doing announcements, we are again marching on Washington on June 15th. So there will be another Poor People's Campaign, March on Washington and to the polls, but the march itself will be on June 15th in Washington, D.C.
So here's our here's our song. We close with Karen and Amy. Are you up for singing?
Okay,
All right.
hold on. Okay. When we make peace instead of war, when we make peace instead of war, how I want to be for that number. When we make peace instead of war, when poverty is history, when poverty is history, how I want to be in that number. When poverty is history, when everyone has equal rights, when everyone has equal rights, how I want to be in that number. When everyone has equal rights, when we make peace instead of war, when we make peace instead of war, how I want to be in that number. When we make peace instead of war.
I love it when Karen and Amy sing because there's two of them and it's almost like we have the grannies together again.